Welcome to the Minnesota Rovers Tuesday evening presentation. Minnesota Rovers is an outdoors club based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Our members organize trips that range from 1 hour to 2 weeks in Minnesota or further afield. Examples of our activities include hiking, biking, backpacking, skiing, snowshoeing, paddling, and rock climbing. We also organize conservation and trail clearing trips. Our members have experience and skills in many outdoor activities, so if you want to learn a new outdoor activity, we can probably help you. For more information, go to mnrovers.org. Now let's move on to this week's presentation.
Tonight, we have a great presentation. Tonight's presenter has been a Rover for 16 years and is also a Rover board member. She's an avid paddler and camper and also enjoys hiking, biking, skiing, and snowshoeing. She has kayak camped in the US, Canada, New Zealand, and Mexico, and paddled with migrating blue whales in the Gulf of California. She's kayaked and camped on 3 of the 5 Great Lakes. So please welcome tonight's presenter, Fran.
So I'm going to be talking about Leave No Trace. And we're going to be talking about what it is, what the principles are, ways that we can apply them. We're going to be doing a little bit of a trivia game, and talk about what you can do particular if it strikes you and you want to do something about it. Leave No Trace is a national organization, but also has a Minnesota chapter, and it's really its mission is to help people to preserve the environment. We all love to play outside. We all love to do things, and we like to be able to go back and find that, things haven't changed significantly as a result of human impact, which has been a big issue the past few years as more people have gone outside and more people without much experience during COVID. Leave No Trace really focuses on educating people to accomplish its mission, and provides a lot of innovative education, which I'll be talking about later on, and some skills. It's also very much research and science-based because this has changed over time. When I think about when I was a kid, in the 60s and early 70s, and camp counselors made me dig a trench around our tent. Of course, it was a huge old canvas tent back in the day. The basics of what we need to do when we're camping have changed. And some of this has resulted from seeing the impact that humans have had on the environment and research around it, looking at the science, and Leave No Trace is pretty involved in all of that, but it really promotes the environment by providing education and increasing awareness. So what's in Minnesota? Minnesota is a really cool place. You all know this, but if you think about it, might borrow a little bit here. We have 1 national wilderness area, the Boundary Waters. We have 12 national wildlife refuges, which is just incredible. In addition to those, we have 6 things. 1 official national park, Voyagers, but also the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area and the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway, Pipestone, now the North Country Scenic Trail, which the Border Route Trail, our Border Route Trail, is a part of. Grand Portage National Monument. We have 2 national forests. We have 75 state parks, and the Twin City metro area alone includes 1 national park, 6 state parks, 1 national wildlife refuge, and 23 state wildlife management areas. It's just incredible. We live in a great place, but we want to protect it, and we want to make sure that the human impact doesn't destroy the experience that we enjoy having. Also in Minnesota, there are a lot of different biomes. We have prairie, we have deciduous forest. In southern Minnesota, we have the coniferous forest up in the northeast angle and more. And we also have prairie. So it's pretty amazing, and the tall grass aspen parkland up in northern Minnesota. So it's pretty amazing when you look at all of the resources that we have. So how to protect them. I'm going to talk about leave no trace. Actually, here's what I suggest you do. I suggest you make this slide a little bit smaller and make me a little bit bigger. So have the speaker appearance and make me a little bit bigger, because I'm going to show you a way to remember these principles. If you're sitting around a campfire, if you're talking to people, you may not have a slide or information in front of you. So there's 7 principles. Number 1 is to plan ahead and prepare. And so I think about that as number 1, planning. Number 2, walk and camp on durable surfaces. So I think about, I have my fingers walk down my arm and onto my hand, travel and camp on durable surfaces so that we're not tearing up the environment or the landscape. Number 3, I think about a little trowel, dispose of waste properly. Number 4, minimize campfire impacts. And I think about, you know, a little rectangle like your phone or your camera. I'm sorry, number 4 is leave what you find. This is in the wrong order. Number 4, leave what you find. Take pictures. Number 5, I think about the campfire flickering. Minimize campfire impacts, making sure that you use fire rings, that you're very careful about the use of campfire. 6 is respect wildlife. So I think about the horns and antlers on my head. And 7 is be considerate of other visitors. So peace and wave at the other visitors, because they're there to join the experience too. So these are the 7 principles. What I want to do now is a little bit of a trivia contest. And I'd like people to, if they can, use the chat. And I've lost the chat here. Use the chat in order to vote. I'm going to stop sharing and then try it again, because I want to share and but I also want to be able to see the chat. There it is. Okay. So vote in the chat, A, B, C, or D. How can trash and litter impact the natural world? Animals might mistake it for food. It can take a long time to break down. C, plastics can persist in the environment indefinitely. D, all of the above. So put in the chat what you think the answer is. Okay, that looks like that was a pretty easy one. Lots of people put D, and that's true. All of those things are true. It can be mistaken for food. It takes a long time to break down, and plastics especially are bad. All right, let's try the next one. When should you plan ahead and prepare? On the drive? Once you're getting there, we have a woman sitting on her rooftop, sitting in a rooftop tent. Before you leave for the trip, when do you need to plan and prepare? That was an easy one too. Everybody's pretty much got C. And part of why that applies to leave no trace, right, is because you need to know where you're going. Different kinds of things, different kinds of practices might be different in different places. If you are in the desert Southwest, you may need to be packing out your poop. If you're in the North Woods, you know, if you don't have an outhouse or thrown in the woods or something like that, you maybe need to be digging. It's okay to dig a cat hole. If you are, if you're thinking about what you're bringing, you may want to do things to minimize the amount of waste that you have to pack out. So it's important to do planning, and that's why that's also important for leave no trace. All right, next one. What should you do with toilet paper? A, burn it. B, pack it out. C, put it under a rock. Yes, you should pack it out. And some people use and some people are grossed out by this, but some people use what's called a pee rag, or there's other names depending on the product, which is made of microfiber and dries quickly and doesn't absorb the stink so much. And they use that as opposed to bringing in toilet paper. So there are a variety of ways to leave no trace. I don't know if you've had the experience of coming across toilet paper in the woods. No fun to see that. Animals tend to pull it out because they can sure smell it, and it's just not a good thing to do. Oops. This one might be a little bit harder. So when you're hiking off trail, should you hike single file or spread out? Now, when you're hiking on trail, I mean, we always like to be able to talk with our friends, but we don't want to widen the trail. If you're hiking off trail, what should you do? Single file or spread out? A or B? Okay, we have some A's and some B's. Somebody want to say something about why they picked A or B?
Fran, this is Stephanie. I initially thought it was single file, but then I changed my mind and I thought it's spread out because then you're going to make the least amount of impact. But I'm guessing maybe make sure that you can talk and hear each other so that you know where everybody is.
Yeah. So here's the thing. If you're on the trail, you want to be single file. You don't want to widen the trail. If you're off the trail, it is very easy. It only takes a few times through to start stamping down the grass or whatever and making an impact and creating what looks to be a new trail. And then more people will take that. And suddenly we're creating a lot more new trails through the wilderness and affecting the environment. If you are in an area that is untouched, sometimes real pristine wilderness areas, parts of Alaska that don't necessarily have trails, and some other places, they tell people to be dispersed, to not walk single file because they don't want them making new trails. You don't want to spread out so far. You're right. You don't want to be spread out so far that you're like yelling at each other and disrupting potential wildlife, or that you're getting separated. But you don't want to necessarily hike single file if you're off trail. That was a little bit harder one, but great, Stephanie. That was good.
Can you hear me? This is Melissa.
Yes, Melissa.
So what comes to mind when you guys ask this is hiking on the Superior Hiking Trail, and we go up to look at an overlook, and there's that micro cryptosporidium, the tiny little things that take 1,000 years to grow. And I worry about going single file, and I worry about being spread out because no matter what, we're stepping on all of that. So my solution is, somebody's keeping an eye out and telling, I guess in that case, I would be trying to hike single file and stepping over and around, being careful where I step for the cryptosporidium, because
that's a good point.
You're going to kill it if you hike single file, or you're going to kill it if you spread out. So maybe it's just being aware in that particular case. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
But that's a great point, Melissa, and I think you're absolutely right about that. And if you're talking about going to lookouts where everybody goes and people do that, it's probably better to do single file and to not spread out the damage if you're talking about stuff that can be damaged just by once over. I've been up on trails in tundra in way high in Colorado, and you stay absolutely on the trail because to walk on the tundra, the stuff grows like minimal amounts every year, and you can destroy it just by walking through it. So part of what your comment is saying is that some of this is being thoughtful about leave no trace and paying attention to these things and knowing some about the environment where you're going so you don't just tear in, oh cool, a cool overlook, let's go. So that you're thoughtful about how we're impacting things. The reality is we will always have an impact.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is minimize that. Thanks. Those are really great, thoughtful answers from both of you. All right, next one. Which one of these is a durable surface? Pine duff, moss-covered rock, or wet grass? So we have some differences of opinion. Anybody want to say something about why they picked what they did?
So this is Melissa again. I picked the wet grass. Well, I didn't pick moss covered rock because you're gonna wreck the moss, even though you're walking on rock. And then I picked wet grass because I couldn't, just because I did. I didn't have a good thought process around pine duff, but I know I didn't want to walk on moss.
Okay, and that's a good answer. Don't walk on the moss covered rocks. Okay, somebody else with a different answer? So the best answer here is pine duff. It usually builds up. It tends to be fairly durable. Wet grass in particular, can be damaged and it can end up with mud. So the best answer here is pine duff, and obviously you're right, Melissa, avoid the moss covered grass. Okay, let's try another one. If there's a mud puddle in the trail, we should go around it or go through it. Great Rover answers. Everybody would go through it. Because if you go around it, you widen the trail. And then actually that becomes indented and more of it gets muddy and you keep widening the trail. Good answer. Okay. True or false? To protect public lands, you need to practice leave no trace perfectly. And everyone is saying false. And that's right. There is no way to protect it perfectly. What we want to think about is weigh the different options and play them against each other. This is not a law. There's some things that are laws. Don't be out there collecting eagle feathers or killing eagles, things like that. But the idea is it's an ethic and it's a decision-making process. And we're going to have an impact just by being there, which, we can't help it. But we want to minimize how much of an impact that we have. Okay. Hey, which of these takes the longest to decompose? I have a picture of plastic. Clearly that takes the longest. But of these three, an aluminum can, a disposable diaper, and fishing line. This is a little bit of a hard one. And I see that a lot of people put question marks next to their answers. These are all bad. Don't leave them out there. But the answer, what takes the longest to decompose, is fishing line. And in ways, you might not see it, and it might be when you're out there camping, it might seem less offensive to you, although it's really dangerous to wildlife that can get entangled in it and stuff. But fishing line lasts the longest. Next one. Okay, so you're supposed to, if you're washing your dishes, or if you're using a cat hole, or if you're doing things like that, you're supposed to be 200 feet away from the water. So how many steps is 200 feet? How do you know you're 200 feet away? And people pretty much know that one step isn't 10 feet, so it's not A, and it's actually B, 70 steps. So if you're trying to figure out how far you are away from the water, that's a quick and dirty way to do it, because obviously we're not going to take a measuring tape and measure out there. All right, next one. What is one thing you can do to avoid transporting species to a new area? Stay on designated paths. A. B. Always hike the same trail. C. Clean gear like boats and boots after use. Good job, folks. The answer is C. Staying on designated paths is maybe important for other reasons. You don't have to always hike on the same trail, and other people are going to be hiking there. But cleaning gear, and people who have been at a lot of the boat landings, have seen DNR people there, sometimes county parks people inspecting boats to make sure that people are cleaning the stuff off their boats to avoid the spread of Eurasian milfoil. You don't usually think about it as much with boots. I actually have a boot cleaning thing that I carry in my car to clean up my boots, both to avoid tracking stuff into my car and to avoid spreading invasive species. When I was in New Zealand, they actually had boot washing places when you went in and out of particular kinds of wilderness areas. And when I went through when I went in the airport, when I went to New Zealand, I had camping gear and kayak gear, and they asked me where I had my tent last pitched and where I had last worn my PFD, what kind of water I'd been in, and where I'd last used my boots. And they irradiated some of my gear, not my PFD, because it had last been used in a chlorinated swimming pool. But some places, some countries are really attentive to this kind of thing. So it's something to think about. Where is it that you're hiking? Where is it that you're paddling, or what you might be carrying with you? What animal can become food habituated? Bear, skunk, wasp, all of these. And in fact, all of them can be. Bears are a big problem because they pose more risk and they're scarier, and they get more attention. We talk about bear boxes and bear hangs and all of those kinds of things. But skunks also, I worked at a summer camp where kids sometimes smuggled food in and had it in their trunks, and a skunk actually would walk through one of the tents, which wasn't too great. But even wasps can. And so that's why you want to be really, really careful about your food. And what ends up happening, that poses some risk to humans, but also often, especially in the case of bears, they end up moving, or sometimes if they're too habituated, they end up putting down the animal. We make the mistakes and they get habituated, but the animal ends up suffering. So that's a bad thing. What natural items provide a source of calcium to small animals such as squirrels and chipmunks? A, antlers, B, bones, C, shells, D, horns, E, all of these. So this is one you probably haven't given a lot of thought to before, but all of you were pretty good at figuring out all of these. A lot of times people think, you see antlers, oh, that's really cool. You see bones or shells, or things like that. And in fact, probably all of us have taken things. But this is an opportunity to think about it and be aware that in ways that we might not think about, and this is where the science is important, we might be having an impact on wildlife in ways that we haven't thought about. And maybe we can, even though we might have done it in the past, we can make a decision to do a little better and to think about this and also help other people be aware. And we've all got cameras along. We can take pictures of the really cool stuff. We don't have to take it out of the natural environment. So which of the following is the most leave no trace source for firewood? A, small pieces of dead and downed wood. B, a standing dead tree. C, branches broken off a tree. D, locally purchased firewood. E, all of these. Okay, the answer is D. Now, often we end up, picking up small pieces of dead and down wood, especially for kindling. But one of the things to keep in mind is that dead and down wood is often a habitat for a variety of kinds of animals, and even bugs and various kinds of things that might be food for other animals. It's part of the natural system of decaying things and helping fertilize the ground. And but you also don't want to bring in firewood from far away because you could end up spreading invasive species. You could end up spreading the ash borer or other things like that can do damage to the trees that are already there. So the best answer is locally purchased firewood, and most of our state parks and a lot of national parks places do have places that you can purchase firewood without end up damaging the area. So, as I've talked about, leave no trace is really an ethic. It's not a law. When I first wanted to be a leave no trace master educator, there were people that I had camped with a lot, mostly kayakers, who said, well, are you going to still be fun to camp with? Are you going to be lecturing us all the time about this stuff? Really, it's a way of thinking about it, and the impact, it partly depends on the location where you are. There are, as I mentioned, there are places that you need to pack out human waste, and there are places where you may need to pay attention to other kinds of things. And so it's important to be prepared for wherever it is that you're going and how it's going to affect things. If you're hiking on very sensitive tundra, or places like that. And it may involve making a decision as to what's the best thing to do. And it's tricky. One of the things that happened when I was in New Zealand is I visited an island that was only 600 years old, and that was a volcanic island. And it was a protected area, and you could not camp there. There were no restaurants. There was potable water available, and there was no place to buy food. You could hike there. You had to take a ferry in, and you had to be on. They counted heads and stuff, and you had to be on the last ferry coming back, or they'd come and get you. And they said that any food had to be in a hard plastic container. Okay. And that was because it had been overrun at one point by rats and possums that had eaten up all of the foliage, and they pretty much eradicated them but they didn't want anything to bring them back. So, hard plastic containers have their own issues, right? Um, there are various kinds of things that have their own issues, but to protect this island, you needed to use something that really sealed like that. And so I had to go out in New Zealand and buy something like that because I hadn't brought anything with me. So it may involve a decision and also awareness of what the rules are and awareness that we are always going to have an impact. And I think the last thing that I would say is that all of us have done things that have impacted areas negatively. We've all done this. From mostly out of lack of awareness, but the science has also changed. But we can think about things and make better decisions and encourage other people to make better decisions. And just be aware of the impact that we're going to have. And that's what I'd encourage people to do. Leave No Trace, it's a national nonprofit. It's got a lot of special programs. It's got some programs where it identifies specific locations, hotspots that they want to give particular attention to and educate people more. They have a traveling trainer team that's actually sponsored by Subaru. That comes out and does things at some of those locations and consults with the people there to help them work out their own kind of plan. It's has education based kinds of programs and lots of training opportunities that I'm going to mention in a minute. It also has research based and provides information on how our behavior impacts the environment. They've recently added a lot of discussion about dark sky stuff. They talk about things to be aware of if you're uploading trail data that might cause people to go places where they shouldn't go or do things that they shouldn't do. And also what kind of message you send in social media posts. They also have research on some of the wildlife impacts because sometimes our presence can impact wildlife even though we may not even be aware the wildlife's there. We can affect some wildlife when we're a half a mile away, affect their behavior. And sadly enough, for those of us who practice quiet sports, sometimes animals are more startled and more stressed by people practicing quiet sports who may come up on them unexpectedly. Whereas if somebody's running loud motors and jet skis and snowmobiles, the wildlife stays a long way away because they know that it's coming. And that's a difficult thing, and I don't have any answers to it, but it's important that we understand the impact that we're having. We had a rover presentation, I don't know, a year or two ago about a special national park that people are not allowed into that essentially protects wildlife. And in fact, in the Apostle Islands, there are a couple of islands that people are not ever allowed to land on because they're essentially bird sanctuaries. And so we just need to be aware of some of those kinds of things. As far as training in Leave No Trace, there's a 3-tiered training kind of structure. I went through the Master Educator course, which was a 5-day field-oriented class up in northern Minnesota, where we camped and spent all of our time, experiencing and looking at things. There's a trainer course, which is a 2-day field course that results in a certificate of completion and is typically taught by master educators. And currently we have over 28,000 trainers around the country, which is a useful thing to offer to people. And we may consider, I'm considering if we have the interest in rovers about offering something like that, but we'll wait and see how much interest there is. There's also various awareness workshops, which range from 30 minutes to a full day introductory workshop about Leave No Trace, designed really for the general public, and millions are trained. And actually, this is probably going to be considered an awareness workshop. Trainers report what it is that they do so that Leave No Trace can keep track of it. So there's a variety of things. There's also an online basic kind of training. So how can you get involved? You can practice leave no trace when you're outside. You can think about these things and be aware of these things. You can visit the Leave No Trace website, which is really cool. It's got interesting research reports. If you're a little bit nerdy like me, it's got an online class you can take. It's got all kinds of things about some of the different kinds of things that they do and sponsor, which I've only just barely touched on. You can like them on Facebook because, of course, they got social media and a Facebook page. You can become a member. As an individual, I'm a member, and there's various levels that you can join at, and you can pick how much money you want to give them. Organizations can become partners, and I'm hoping that the Rovers will choose to be a Leave No Trace partner, and that's at a variety of different levels, ranging from little community organizations like us and nonprofits, all the way up to big companies like Subaru and other big companies who have opted to become real big supporters. You can tell others about it. You can take a course, including the online awareness course. So the website is lnt.org. That's pretty easy, leavenotrace.org, lnt.org. And that's where all kinds of resources are. There's also a special thing, Peak Online, which lets you introduce kids to Leave No Trace. And there's special Leave No Trace programs that are set up for kids. Scouting, both Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts have Leave No Trace kinds of programs. And that might be one thing that the Rovers want to do in some of our family-oriented and kid-oriented programming. The state advocate, Terry Fick, who spoke to us once before, you can contact her at mnadvocate@lnt.org. She's got lots of information, and she's provided me with some of the information that I've used at some of our extravaganzas. And here's various kinds of resources. The hand signs that I showed you is also on YouTube. There's a video library of and various activities that are going on. There's opportunities for people who are interested to do citizen science stuff and to set up citizen science focused kinds of programs, or to be part of somebody else's. There's site assessments where if there are particular sites that you're concerned about, you can look in and do that, do an assessment of that place. There's information for people who work outdoors about ways to look at and the research and the resources and Leave No Trace for outdoor workplaces. And there's also a gold standard toolkit, which is designed really to provide materials for every park and every location to kind of stick up to the Leave No Trace gold standard. So there's a lot of stuff out there through the organization and a lot of ways that we can be advocates. And I think it's one of the things that really fits with the Rovers. We love the outside and we want to play in it, and we also don't want to see it damaged. We want to be able to enjoy these things. So thanks for listening, and thanks for thinking about these kinds of things, because we want our kids and our grandkids to be able to experience this stuff too. So I'm open for questions or discussion.
So it's Melissa again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm never sure if I'm unmuted or not. So I want to give an example that's not ground-based. I think from last fall's extravaganza, after you had given the Leave No Trace thing last fall, then several of us went on a kayak on the lake out at Baker. I think it was there. And there was a channel that looked interesting to go explore, but it was all covered with lily pads. And I had started to go down it, and then I remembered your Leave No Trace thing and turned around and said, if the four of us wanted to go explore that, we would be beating our way through that channel with our paddles. And no, I don't, that's a Leave No Trace thing. So no, we're not going to go do that break apart lily pads and all that. So it's not always land-based. And it was just an interesting, oh my gosh, here's a thing where it applies. So I'll just say that to broaden your horizons.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, Fran. It's Stephanie.
Yes.
I was wondering, I got on a little bit late, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to go over what the hand signals are again. But if you don't want to repeat it, that's okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Number one, plan ahead. Okay. Which is easy to think about when we're planning a trip. That's the first thing that we do, plan ahead. Number two, and part of that means thinking about the place that you're going and how leave no trace applies and how you can minimize whatever impact you might have. Okay. Number two, walk and camp on durable space places. Okay. Number three, take out what you bring in. So pack out what you bring in. Number four, and I think about the camera thing, is leave what you find. So take pictures, but leave it there for the next person. Okay. Number five, be careful about campfires. Number six, respect wildlife. And number seven, respect other people. Peace. Okay.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay. I hope that if people are interested, we can look at maybe doing some other kinds of things to involve rovers and to make it part of some of our conservation efforts. Providing their fun activities. I have a whole bunch of them that people can do to help increase awareness, and other rovers could do. We could partner with some state parks. I'm doing some work now to partner with Voyageurs National Park. And so that's something that you might think about if this is something that you're interested in doing more about.
Fran, there is a question in the chat that it might be worth answering. Can you give a good description of how to do dishes properly in the BWCA?
Yes. Well, there are a variety of ways to do that, and a lot of times camping, especially in groups, that's it's a pain. What you want to do, what's really helpful is to minimize the amount that you have to clean up. And that means, I know that we're all hungry in the BWCA, but I think that there's a tendency sometimes to over prepare for food, and to avoid having as much cleanup and avoid having as much to pack out. I wasn't on this trip, but I heard about a kayak trip where they made way too many Brussels sprouts, and they had to pack the Brussels sprouts out. And the person's kayak smelled like Brussels sprouts forever, which was unpleasant. I'm glad they packed it out, but it was unpleasant. So when you're done cooking, one of the things that you can do is put hot water into your bowl. Try to get all the little bits out of your bowl, and then put hot water into your bowl, and you can drink some of the bits down. When you are cleaning, do it more than 200 feet from the shore. And if you can, it's helpful if there's still bits in your stuff, or if you couldn't bring yourself to, add to your hydration and drink down any little bits left in your bowl, you can strain out the bits. You can make an easy strainer. It's something that I did once with some scouts, with a piece of screen and some duct tape, and it's pliable, and you can, it's really easy to use to screen out the bits, and pack those out, and a thing like that packs really easily. And so minimize the amount that you have to clean, And while you want to be careful about if you're using soap, using something that is specifically designed for camping, and then dispersing your your drain water, and all of those things can be a little bit of a pain. But if you make it compact, if you make it small, if you clean out small kinds of balls, and really try to get rid of your bits, it's not as difficult as it might sound. So
Fran, it's Melissa. Is it better to disperse your water rather than dumping it in the fire pit? I'm guessing if you leave the fire pit wet, then who's ever coming along next has crappy fire building possibilities.
Well, you want to completely put out the fire.
Yeah.
And it also, and you really want the fire to be, and you're going to probably use water to do that anyway. You're going to want it to be cool to the touch. It depends on how much crap's in your water.
Well, I'm imagining that you've strained out all the bits. I'm just thinking in terms of keeping all the crappy water in one place rather than 6 different parties throughout 3 weeks distributing it around in the woods. Like keeping it in one place rather than distributed, but I don't know if there's a good reason.
You don't want there to be any food bits in it because that's going to attract animals to your fire.
Right. Yeah, no, I get, okay.
Absolutely. And you absolutely, so it's best if it's dirty water to get it out in
the woods.
To get it away from camp too.
Okay.
You don't want to habituate animals.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
There's not easy answers to any of this stuff, but
no, that's a good
thinking about the process and thinking about what's going to attract animals and what's going to be an issue is what's important.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for watching this Minnesota Rovers presentation. If you want to see more, please click on the link to our channel or the subscribe button below. Thank you.